The question, sharp with condescending disbelief, cut through the low hum of the hangar's fluorescent lights. Staff Sergeant Miller, a man whose crisp uniform and confident posture screamed digital age proficiency, held a data tablet in one hand and gestured dismissively with the other. Is this some kind of joke? We called the depot for a Tier 4 specialist, not a fashion model playing mechanic. The airmen gathered around the Warthog, a team of half a dozen technicians in their early 20s, exchanged smirks and elbow nudges. One whispered something about diversity hires that drew muffled laughter. She took a slow step forward, the soft scuff of her worn work boots echoing slightly on the polished concrete floor. The airmen gathered around the Warthog. A team of half a dozen technicians in their early 20s exchanged smirks and elbow nudges. One whispered something about diversity hires that drew muffled laughter. Miller let out an exasperated sigh. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to remain by the entrance. This is an active maintenance area for a critical flight asset." His tone was the one you'd use on a lost civilian who'd wandered into a restricted zone. Sarah's gaze traced the lines of the A-10 from the blunt nose housing the GAU-8 Avenger cannon to the twin tails angled high in the air. She saw past the matte gray paint and the stenciled serial numbers. She saw the soul of the machine. "She's in pain." Sarah finally turned her gaze to Sergeant Miller, her voice calm and measured. "What's she telling you?" Miller scoffed, tapping his tablet with an aggressive finger. "She's telling us a lot of things, sweetheart. The ECU is failing to handshake with the digital throttle quadrant. The MIL-ML STD-155-3 data bus is throwing a cascade of fault codes we can't trace. We've hot-swapped every relevant line-replaceable unit from the DAS to the CICU. We've run diagnostics for 72 straight hours." He rattled off the acronyms like a priest reciting liturgy, his voice dripping with the superiority of someone who believed technology had all the answers. "The bird is dead in the water, and we're supposed to be on a deployment rotation in 5 days. He looked her up and down with barely disguised contempt. "So unless you've got some kind of magic touch, we don't need someone here who looks like they walked off an Instagram feed." Sarah nodded slowly, absorbing the information without looking at the glowing screen. She walked toward the aircraft, her pace unhurried but purposeful. Miller stepped in her path, physically blocking her. "Whoa there, miss, I need to see your credentials. You can't just walk up and touch a $30 million piece of hardware. Liability issues, you understand." Sarah stopped. She didn't seem offended, just patient. She reached into the chest pocket of her coveralls and pulled out a military ID card in a clear plastic holder. It showed her photo, along with Department of Defense credentials that identified her as a civilian technical consultant, GS-14 level. Miller snatched it, his eyes scanning with practiced suspicion. Sarah Mitchell, civilian consultant. He looked up, his expression a perfect mask of incredulity mixed with something darker resentment. "What are you going to do? Bat your eyelashes at the engine until it starts?" A few of the younger airmen snickered again. Sarah simply reached down and picked up a compact canvas tool roll she'd set by her feet. She began to unroll it on a nearby workbench. The tools inside were not the gleaming laser-etched instruments the other mechanics used. They were practical, their steel showing the patina of heavy use, their handles wrapped with worn grip tape. They looked like tools that had seen real combat maintenance. "What in the world is that?" Miller asked, his voice dripping with derision. "Did you raid your boyfriend's garage?" "Ma'am, this is a controlled environment. We use calibrated, certified equipment, not—" He pointed at a strangely configured socket wrench, its head bent at an unusual angle. "I'm pretty sure that thing doesn't even exist in the standard toolkit. Did you make that yourself? That's adorable." The condescension was thick enough to cut. Several airmen moved closer, their curiosity mixing with amusement. This young woman with her makeshift tools was a welcome distraction from 3 days of maddening frustration. Sarah picked up the modified wrench, her capable fingers closing around it with familiar comfort. "Sometimes the standard toolkit is the problem," she said quietly, her voice carrying in the vast space despite its softness. She looked at the access panel near the A-10's main landing gear strut. "Did you manually check the hydraulic pressure regulator bypass valve? Not the digital readout, actually check it." Miller threw his hands up. "Manually?" The system diagnostics cleared the entire hydraulic loop. "The pressure is nominal. It's an electronic issue, a software ghost in the machine. It's not something you can fix with whatever folksy wisdom you think you learned on YouTube." "Diagnostics can lie," Sarah said, her gaze unwavering. "They only see what they're programmed to look for." She took a step toward the plane. Miller's face hardened, his patience already thin, snapping. "That's it. You are not authorized to be here, and you are certainly not authorized to touch this aircraft." His voice rose, echoing in the hangar. "You are interfering with United States Air Force property. I don't care who sent you or what kind of connections you think you have. This isn't a place for amateurs." As Miller's voice rose, the hangar around Sarah began to blur. The sneering face of the sergeant, the gleam of fluorescent lights off the Warthog's fuselage, the low hum of electricity, it all started to fade, replaced by a different sound, a different light. The roar of mortar fire, the acrid smell of burning fuel and sand, the scorching heat of an Iraqi sun beating down on a forward operating base. A younger Sarah, 24 years old, her face streaked with dirt and sweat, her uniform stained with hydraulic fluid, was wedged impossibly deep inside the damaged engine compartment of an Apache helicopter. The same uniquely angled wrench was in her hand, its strange configuration the only thing allowing her to reach a critical bolt that had sheared off during a hard landing under enemy fire. Outside, her crew chief was screaming, "Mitchell, we gotta evac now. They're ranging us in." The ground shook with another impact, closer this time. Dust and debris rained down on her back. She ignored it all, her focus absolute. With a final desperate twist, the bolt seated. She scrambled out of the engine bay, giving a thumbs up with grease-blackened hands. "Fire her up!" The turbine whined, coughed black smoke, then caught with a rising shriek. The Apache's rotors began to turn before she'd even cleared the maintenance area. She stood on the cracked concrete, chest heaving, the modified wrench still clutched in her hand, feeling its familiar life-saving weight. The memory vanished as quickly as it came. She was back in the sterile hangar. Sergeant Miller was still talking, his face now red with anger and something else, a deep-seated resistance to the idea that this woman could possibly know more than him. "And I will have you escorted off this base by security forces if you take one more step. Are we clear?" From the edge of the group, a young woman, Airman First Class Davis, watched the confrontation with growing unease. She'd seen the work order, she'd seen the name Sarah Mitchell, personally requested by General Thompson, and she'd seen the way her sergeant, a man she'd once respected, was treating this quiet, composed woman with barely concealed contempt that went beyond professional skepticism. It was wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. Miller's arrogance had tipped into outright hostility. "We have protocols for a reason, ma'am. To protect the equipment, to protect people like you from getting in over your heads. This isn't a lawnmower engine. Maybe you're used to working on cars or something, but this requires actual expertise." That was the last straw for Davis. While Miller was busy posturing for his subordinates, she slipped away from the group, her heart pounding. She found an unused maintenance alcove behind a stack of equipment crates. She pulled out her personal cell phone, fingers flying across the screen. She didn't have the general's number, but she had the next best thing, the direct line to the wing command chief, a woman known for her zero-tolerance policy toward any form of discrimination or disrespect. The aide answered, "Command Chief's office." "This is Airman Davis from the 355th Maintenance Squadron," she said, her voice low and urgent. "I need to speak with the chief. It's an emergency." "What kind of emergency, Airman?" "It's about Miss Sarah Mitchell, ma'am. General Thompson sent her to look at the downed A-10 in Hangar 4, and Sergeant Miller is about to have her arrested." The line went silent, not a disconnected silence, but a heavy, profound quiet that spoke volumes. Davis could hear the faint sound of a chair scraping back, of muffled but urgent words spoken away from the receiver. Help was on the way. The balance of power was about to shift catastrophically. Inside the wing command building, the command chief, Chief Master Sergeant Patricia Reeves, hung up the phone, her expression turning to stone. She didn't hesitate. She didn't bother with the intercom. She moved with frightening speed, striding down the hallway and bursting into General Thompson's office without knocking. The general, a two-star with a chest full of ribbons and an air of perpetual focus, looked up from a stack of briefing documents, his eyes flashing with annoyance at the breach of protocol. "What is it, Chief?" "General, we have a code red situation in Hangar 4. Thompson's posture stiffened immediately. "Fire? Active threat? What?" "Worse, sir." The chief's voice was grim. "It's Sarah Mitchell. You sent for her to look at the grounded A-10. The general nodded. "I did. Best troubleshooter in the entire theater. Did she figure it out already?" "She hasn't had the chance, sir. The NCO in charge, Staff Sergeant Miller, is refusing her access to the aircraft. According to the airman who called me, he's been mocking her, making inappropriate comments about her appearance and qualifications, and is currently threatening to have her arrested by security forces." The transformation in General Thompson was immediate and terrifying. The bureaucratic focus vanished, replaced by a glacial fury that seemed to drop the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. He stood, his chair scraping back harshly. He grabbed his service cap from its stand, settling it on his head in one smooth, angry motion. "Get my vehicle. Now. Get the wing commander on the radio and tell her to meet me at Hangar 4 in 5 minutes. And pull the service record and performance reviews for Staff Sergeant Miller. I want them on my tablet before we arrive." The chief was already out the door, her voice echoing as she barked orders into her radio. Back in Hangar 4, Sergeant Miller had reached the apex of his self-importance. Sarah Mitchell hadn't moved, hadn't responded to his threats. She just stood there, her quiet competence a silent rebuke that infuriated him more than any argument could have. "All right, that's it." Miller finally pulled his radio from his belt. "You've had your little field trip. I'm calling security forces. Maybe a nice chat with them will remind you what happens when unqualified civilians wander onto a secure flight line." He held the radio to his mouth, thumb hovering over the transmit button. "This is for your own safety. We can't have you getting hurt or breaking something we can't fix." It was the ultimate condescension, framing his prejudice as protection. Just as Miller's thumb depressed the button, a sound from outside the hangar overrode the quiet within. Not the distant drone of a jet, but the high-pitched, insistent wail of sirens. Multiple sirens growing louder at an alarming rate. Every head in the hangar turned toward the massive doors. With a low groan, they began to slide open, flooding the space with brilliant afternoon sunlight. Silhouetted against the glare was a black command vehicle, flanked by 2 military police trucks with lights flashing. They screeched to a halt just outside the hangar entrance. The driver's door flew open and General Thompson stepped out, his expression a mask of controlled rage. He was followed immediately by the wing commander, a full colonel whose face showed a mixture of confusion and dread. The airmen who'd been lounging and smirking moments before snapped to attention with a collective clatter of boots on concrete. Sergeant Miller froze, the radio still in his hand, his mouth agape. His entire world had just tilted on its axis. General Thompson strode into the hangar, his polished shoes clicking an angry rhythm on the floor. He didn't even glance at Miller or the stunned technicians. His eyes were locked on one person. He walked directly to Sarah Mitchell, stopped precisely 3 feet in front of her, and executed the sharpest, most impeccably respectful salute Miller had ever witnessed. It was a salute reserved for heroes, for dignitaries, for people of immense stature. "Miss Mitchell," the general's voice boomed, sharp and clear, "it is an honor to have you here. I apologize profoundly for the reception you have received on my base." Sarah, who had remained unmoved by Miller's hostility, seemed almost uncomfortable under the weight of such formal respect. She returned the salute with a crisp, perfect gesture, clearly military-trained, despite her civilian status. Then General Thompson turned. His body moved with the precision of a striking predator. His icy gaze swept over the ramrod-straight airman, and finally settled on Sergeant Miller, pinning him in place like an insect. "Do you have any idea who this is?" The general's voice was deceptively calm, yet it carried an edge of tempered steel that made every person in the hangar flinch. Miller could only shake his head, his face draining of color. "This," the general announced, his voice rising to fill the cavernous space, "is Chief Warrant Officer Sarah Mitchell, retired. This woman has more combat maintenance hours on tactical aircraft than every single one of you has been alive, combined." He took a step toward the silent A-10, running a hand along its wing as if it were a prized thoroughbred. When this aircraft's targeting systems kept failing during high-stress combat maneuvers in Afghanistan, when Lockheed Martin's engineers couldn't solve it remotely, when 3 different maintenance crews gave up, they called her. She was in Kandahar. She redesigned the entire fire control interface architecture in 48 hours in a tent, under mortar fire. Her modifications are still in the technical manual. He turned back to the crowd, his eyes blazing. "She wrote the advanced troubleshooting protocols for the GAU-8 Avenger cannon's feed system. Not suggested edits, she wrote them, at 26 years old, under combat conditions, while her base was being attacked." The general took a final, menacing step toward Miller. When an entire squadron of Apache helicopters was grounded in Iraq due to a systemic turbine failure that no one could diagnose, they flew her in from another theater. She identified the problem in 6 hours, a harmonic resonance issue that the manufacturer's engineers had missed, and had all 12 birds flight-ready in 3 days. His voice dropped to a near whisper that was somehow more terrifying than a shout. "This aircraft isn't just a machine to her. It's her life's work. It's her legacy. And you," he said, his gaze boring into Miller, "have just insulted one of the finest technical minds the United States military has ever produced, on her own professional ground, because you made assumptions based on what she looks like instead of who she is." A profound, shameful silence descended upon the hangar. The smirks were gone, replaced by expressions of disbelief, awe, and burning embarrassment. Airman Davis felt tears of vindication trace down her cheeks. The truth was out, and it was more powerful than she'd imagined. The wing commander stepped forward, her face grave. "Sergeant Miller, with me. Now." The words were a death sentence for Miller's career, and everyone knew it. He followed the colonel out of the hangar like a man walking to his execution. General Thompson's posture relaxed slightly as he turned back to Sarah. "Sarah, from the bottom of my heart, I am profoundly sorry. There is no excuse for that kind of treatment." Sarah simply shook her head, a flicker of tired sadness in her sharp eyes. She looked at the remaining young airmen, who were now staring at her as if seeing her for the first time. "They're good people, General," Sarah said, her voice carrying surprising lack of malice. "Just overconfident in their technology. They've been taught that the computer knows everything, that the diagnostic system can't be wrong." She looked at the silent Warthog. "But machines have personalities. They make sounds. They vibrate in specific ways when something's wrong. You can't feel that through a screen. You have to listen to it, touch it, understand it." She picked up her canvas toolkit, the familiar scent of oil and well-used steel filling the air. She selected a different tool this time, a simple-looking torque wrench with grip tape worn smooth from thousands of hours of use. She held it for a moment, her thumb running along the worn tape. The pristine hangar dissolved. She was 22 years old again, fresh from technical school, standing in a maintenance bay at Bagram Airfield. A grizzled female chief warrant officer, a legend who'd kept Black Hawks flying through Desert Storm, was pressing this very wrench into her hands. "This was issued to me when I was your age," the chief had said, her voice thick with meaning. "It's seen every conflict since Panama. It's not magical, it's not special, but it's been held by women who refused to quit when everyone said they didn't belong here." She'd gripped Sarah's shoulder. "Now it's yours. Remember, it's not about the tool. It's about the knowledge you build, the respect you earn, and the competence you prove every single day. Don't ever forget that." The memory faded, leaving the old wrench feeling warm in her hand. Sarah walked to the A-10. The crowd of subdued airmen parted before her like water. She didn't plug in a diagnostic computer or consult a tablet. She simply knelt by the main landing gear, placing her free hand flat against the cold metal of the fuselage. She closed her eyes, just feeling. Then she used the metal handle of the wrench to tap gently on various points of an access panel. Her head tilted, listening intently to the resonance of each tap, the subtle variations in pitch and tone. After several moments, she stopped. A faint, knowing smile touched her lips. "Harmonic vibration," she announced. "There's a microfracture in the mounting bracket for the hydraulic accumulator. Every time the APU spools up, it throws off the pressure sensors by fractions of a percent, too small for your diagnostics to flag as an actual error, but enough to make the flight control computer refuse to initialize." She looked up at Airman Davis. "Hand me a half-inch drive torque wrench, please. Calibrated to 45 foot-pounds." Davis practically ran to get it, her face flushed with excitement and vindication. Sarah took the wrench, attached a socket with practiced efficiency, and reached deep inside the landing gear well. There was a single soft click as she made a minute adjustment, no more than an eighth of a turn. She pulled the wrench out, wiped her hands on a rag from her pocket, and stood up smoothly. "Try her now," she said quietly. All eyes turned to Airman Davis. With a nod from the general, she climbed the ladder into the cockpit. She strapped herself in, hands trembling slightly as she reached for the engine start sequence. She looked down at Sarah, who gave her an encouraging nod. Davis took a deep breath and flipped the first switch. For a second, there was only the familiar whine of the auxiliary power unit. Then a low rumble started deep within the aircraft, a sound they hadn't heard in 3 days. The rumble grew into a deep, guttural roar as the A-10's twin General Electric engines spooled to life, their iconic sound filling the hangar with thunderous, beautiful noise. The Warthog was alive. The airmen erupted in spontaneous cheers, a wave of pure relief and joy. In the weeks that followed, a directive from General Thompson's office mandated a new training program for the entire maintenance wing. Practical Fundamentals, a course where experienced veterans, regardless of age or gender, were brought in to share hands-on knowledge with the new generation of technicians. The first course, naturally, was taught by Chief Warrant Officer Sarah Mitchell. She stood not at a podium, but beside an open-engine cowling, her worn canvas tool roll spread out before her. Several months later, in a quiet coffee shop near the base, Sarah sat alone at a corner table, reviewing technical schematics on a tablet. The door opened and a young man in civilian clothes walked in. No longer wearing sergeant's stripes, it was Miller. He saw her, hesitated for a long moment, then walked over. He didn't offer a grand apology or dramatic speech. He simply gestured to the empty chair. "Miss Mitchell," he began, his voice quiet and genuinely humbled. "I was wondering, if you had a minute, could you tell me about working on the Apache helicopters in Iraq? I want to learn, really learn, not from a manual, from someone who actually lived it." Sarah stopped reviewing her schematics. She looked at the young man, really looked at him, and saw not arrogance but genuine contrition and a desire to grow. A warm smile spread across her face. "Pull up a chair," she said. "It started on a dust-covered forward operating base outside Mosul. The greatest tools in any hangar aren't found in a toolbox. They're respect, humility, and the willingness to learn from those who came before you, regardless of what they look like." If you were moved by Sarah Mitchell's story, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Veterans Past Stories for more incredible tales of unsung heroes who changed everything.